For 200 years, George Washington University has offered students and faculty an unparalleled location to participate in American democracy. Activists Peyton Wilson, Nick Greer, Dr. Jeffrey Ackman, and trustee Rosalind Brock each leveraged GW in their own way to create social change.
When I was dean, very early part of the Black Lives Matter movement, and the medical students across the country had started a White Coat for Black Lives chapter at GW. The students were planning a die-in on the corner of 23rd and I. The students didn't want me to know because they thought that I would stop it. So I was like, okay, come in. You don't know who I am. Of course I was going to be supportive, right? I was thrilled to see the students protesting. I was thrilled. We are blessed by being in the heart of the nation's capital. And something like activism fits so well in that context of our location.
I'm Rosalind Brock, and I chair the National Board of Directors of the NAACP. The NAACP stands with you today in solidarity. As a nonpartisan organization of over 500,000 members across the length and breadth of this nation, in 50 states, Germany and Japan, to declare that women's rights are human rights. My name is Rosalind Brock, and I'm a graduate of George Washington University. There are not many institutions in our nations who has such a rich history as the George Washington University. And to have the many thousands of students and alumni who are making a difference across the world, literally. And it's always good to say that, oh, I graduated from George Washington, and someone said, so did I. It's a special kind of person because we know that that person has a broad worldview and they have a commitment to make a difference and to have social impact.
I started my sophomore year there as I went to the University of Pittsburgh the year before. So I guess I was there in '66. And I graduated GW in '69. When I first arrived at GW, most of the things that were talked about were with regard to civil rights, as the Voting Rights Act had just passed. The majority of people who were being sent to Vietnam were people of color, poor people, including white people, people who wanted to get out of Appalachia. So the majority of people who were being sent to Vietnam were, not your average college kids. We felt that was also unjust. I was very involved in Vietnam, with the Vietnam War. In the early stages, I saw it as immoral. And then when they got into the bombing, for example, of Cambodia and Laos, I helped organize the larger demonstrations. We used to bring as many as 750,000 people to DC to march. And I just stayed with it for several years. And I would mostly go to schools, speak at universities. It was part of my life for a long time.
I was going to bring out some pictures
of the demonstrations. This is, I mentioned earlier, the demonstration Strike 3 against Nixon, Wallace, and Humphrey. And this was the initial march that we started down, I think it's Independence Avenue, just before the police arrived. Pretty much that whole era of my life was demonstrating, being told we couldn't demonstrate. Our friends were dying. it brought us to what we did.
The late 60s was a tumultuous time on college campuses around the country. GW faced its own reckoning for its underrepresentation of Black students and faculty. The organization, the Black Student Union, emerged during this time.
The BSU, Black Student Union, it was founded in 1968, and it's pretty much the umbrella organization for Black students and other Black organizations on campus. I grew up in Marietta, Georgia. I was one of the few people who was really interested in politics and cared about politics. I actually went to my first protest with my dad in 2016 after the murders of Philando Castile and Alton Sterling. Being at GW has definitely pushed me to think about things differently and think about the way I approach activism differently. Something about this summer was just so much more raw than it was in the past. It's a collective mourning that happens in our community every single time. BSU was still concerned about our community and what our community would need. And so we knew, given kind of the platform we had to do something, we had to advocate for something. And we sent a letter to the DC Police Department with a list of demands. BSU's also raised money for some bail funds and Black Lives Matter organizations in DC. Over summer, we were able to raise almost $10,000, which I was so proud of us, but I was more proud of GW and our community for caring and wanting to be invested in this.
As students, now is the time for you to protest, to march, to have sit-ins, to write petitions, to raise your voice, to exercise your rights in this democratic society, and that we implore and encourage young people who are on the campus to share your values and be able to find your voice, raise your voice, and then be able to speak truth to power.
When I arrived here, I was 21, really focused on medical school than any sense of activism or so. In medical school, I wasn't really out. The landscape around homosexuality was very, very challenging at that time. Everything really started changing for me when AIDS started hitting. GW Hospital really was the epicenter for healthcare around HIV. I started going into their rooms and sitting with them to understand what was going on with their medical problem. And I knew that there was this incredible stigma and fear and anxiety. My friends are dying, my patients are dying, so much death, and the stakes were so high. I started then feeling more like I could speak truth to power, as it were. And I applied for a grant with the National Institute of Mental Health to do HIV/AIDS work. And my chairman was a psychoanalyst and who in many ways was a mentor to me. He said to me, "Jeff, if you get this grant, people are going to think you're gay." And he essentially was implying that your career is going to be shot. There was no turning back. I was going to try and help people in as many different ways as I could. At that moment, I felt like this is what I was meant to do.
Dr. Ackman would go on to become a national activist, leader, and spokesperson on HIV, as well as gay and lesbian health issues. In 2010, he was appointed as the first openly gay dean of a medical school.
I'm very glad I did what I did. It wouldn't change anything. As a young person, you are usually much more involved in realizing things are not fair. And we had some successes. Lyndon Johnson said he would not run again. I'll never forget that night.
It would be great if I could not face the fear of being murdered every time I leave my home. I don't want to be doing this forever. I'm 20 years old, And my dad's always like, Peyton, I don't think you have that choice. Like, you've kind of been chosen by some divine entity to do this work. So I'm glad that I was able to come here and really develop my voice as an activist and as a community advocate.
The whole notion of bleeding buff and blue, I knew that this was a place that nurtured me and my activism.
George Washington University is affirming of its student populations, and we want them to leave as citizen ambassadors so that they will truly raise high to make our society a better place.